I'm Mitchell Shear with Vornado, Charles E. Smith, based in D.C. This is Alexa Arena with Forest City, based in San Francisco. This is Mark Lapidus of WeWork, based in New York, and sort of wherever else they can possibly be at any moment in time, they will be. And Mark Galbraith with Liquid Spaces, who is in all spaces and all the time. So hopefully we can have some fun here. We've already heard all the big pundits and whatnot. So what I thought we would do to get started is each of these guys are disrupting the norm in some way, and are actually doing some interesting things. In the little flyer, they were touted as change agents. So just to warm things up, we're just going to have these guys each do a couple-minute introduction and just kind of explain to you a little bit sort of how they're approaching real estate right now. And we're going to start with Liquid Space.
Charlie?
Yes.
Thanks, Mitchell. Is it okay if I take 4 minutes, maybe?
I'm cutting you off. I'm cutting you off at 3, but go ahead.
Hi, folks. I'm Mark Gilbreth. I'm the CEO and founder of Liquid Space. We're a technology company, a real estate technology company based in San Francisco. So I thought, as one of those West Coast guys, I would walk into this world of real estate and give you an understanding of how we're doing our very level best to disrupt office. So what you're going to hear here in about 6 slides is just a quick narrative on how we look at the world of real estate, what motivated me to start this company 4 years ago, and how we're engaging with both asset owners as well as large enterprises and as well as individual professionals in a marketplace model. So big picture backdrop. What I saw 5 years ago when I started noodling on the concept for Liquid Space was a conundrum in corporate real estate. In the conversations that I was having with large occupiers, I saw that most portfolio managers within large enterprises were wrestling with an impossible situation. They had too much inventory in certain locations, too little in others, and large portions of their portfolios that were completely irrelevant, oftentimes due to acquisitions. And how are you to manage a workplace or an enterprise when you're struggling with all 3 of those parameters at the same time? The question is, how did we get to that situation? And arguably, from our point of view, there is a long-standing but very flawed, very broken asset management model when it comes to office. We think about the driving dynamic behind office need. It's headcount, it's people, right? And much as we'd all like to be able to forecast headcount within a company as something that's up and to the right and only up and to the right, the reality is it ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows with the performance of your own company. It also ebbs and flows with external events like recessions and environmental events. And so with a resource requirement that looks like this, the legacy model that we've had to try to fill that area under the curve, to put butts in seats, has been the long-term acquisition or leasing of office. 5, 7, 10-year or longer commitments to space. You simply can't fill the curve efficiently. And you invariably end up with either periods of shortage, where you're scrambling to try to create workplace assets to be able to sit those employees you've just hired during a tear of growth. But more often than not, you're also sitting under long-term waste or long-term excess that you have banked inside your portfolio that you're paying every day, but not utilizing. So we see a broken asset model. We also see a broken human capital model. If you think about Workplace 1.0 as it's been practiced for the last 100 years of this industrial era of ours, in general, you've got a troika of a financial person, a CFO often within a company, a CRE or a facilities manager thinking about workplace, and a landlord or an asset owner who come together and consider a number of factors to try to create an engaging and compelling workplace. So they're going to look at the stock price to see how much they can afford to spend. They're going to look at things like employee churn rates. They'll look at lease comps in the market. They'll look at their forecasts for 10 years in terms of staffing. As a sidebar, how effectively can we actually forecast even a quarter or 2 in terms of our real employee growth? They'll look at things like portfolio analysis. They'll also even be influenced by the cool stuff that they saw at NeoCon in terms of the new systems that Herman Miller or Steelcase or Hayworth want us to buy. And they'll mull all those things together, and that calculus will spit out something like this, right? The cube farm that we all started our careers in, right? A cube farm that was built on the notion that we're going to put an employee at a desk because that's where they have to be, because I need to be able to see them to manage them, and that's also where the computer is that they work at. Well, that chain's been cut, right? We're no longer chained to our desks. This thing that was mentioned earlier this morning, this thing that came out in 2007, and all the technology that go with it has decoupled us from the desk. We're not mobile. And so there's a bigger trend happening here, and we refer to it at Liquid Space as the consumerization of business, or the consumerization of the enterprise. So let's step back for a moment and contemplate the typical life in the workday for a typical enterprise employee today, and let's look at some of the technologies that they are now leveraging on a daily basis. So let's imagine I'm a sales exec. and I need to put together some updated marketing slides for a customer presentation. I'm just as likely today to go to an online marketplace like Odesk to hire some extremely talented graphic artist to create those slides for me in an hour or two, rather than submit the request to my marketing department and hope that it comes back in 2 weeks. That's a marketplace that didn't exist 6 years ago that's now eating the world of labor. Time to go on the road and head to the airport to go visit my client. I'm going to tap Uber, which I do almost every day, to have a car magically appear at the curb where I'm standing with one tap of a button on an app. Who's used Uber? Right? And by the way, they only just started a corporate sales campaign. So Uber has exploded into popularity, has become now a $17 billion company. It didn't exist 5 years ago. It's a marketplace, just like Odesk, transforming the transportation industry. I arrive at the client location or at the city that I'm traveling to, and rather than having that meeting in a Starbucks or a Panera or in the lobby of an anonymous hotel, I'm going to do so with LiquidSpace. I'm going to find a great space where I need it, when I need it, and pay for it. Another marketplace that's transforming the way professionals are choosing resources. If I really want to make that a meeting that shines, I might even tap into yet another online marketplace like Postmates to have catered food brought to that location. And lastly, at the end of that progressive day of mine on the road, I'm just as likely to spend the night in an Airbnb as I am in some anonymous business hotel. Airbnb, yet another $10 billion plus marketplace business that did not exist 5 years ago. Transformations of labor, transportation, office, food, lodging. These are all marketplace businesses. They're all electronic. They're on the web. They're on your phone. And they're eating the world. So our slice of this is allowing professionals, those same people that are tapping on Uber, tapping on Airbnb, tapping on Odesk, allowing those same individuals, the employees of your companies, the employees of companies like Accenture and Deloitte and others, to simply find and book space on demand where they need it, paying for it by the drink rather than buying or paying for long-term leases. So what does that look like? It looks like a lot of the other marketplaces that are now commonplace. From the forebearers like eBay and Amazon that really were the first generation of major and massive online marketplaces, to late runners like Uber and Airbnb, highly visual marketplaces that live on your phone, that work in real time, that allow you to very efficiently match demand with assets. So our two constituents at LiquidSpace are professionals, people that are working, people that are leaving the office to get work done more and more of the time. That's the demand side. And on the supply side, it's asset owners, right? It's everything from large REITs that are using our marketplace platform to share space privately amongst their tenants, major hotel chains like Marriott and Hilton that are using our platform to drive the utilization and access to meeting rooms and lobby spaces, co-working spaces like WeWork, office business centers like ServCorp by the hundreds, and even private companies now that are looking at those largely underutilized portfolios, those meeting rooms, those offices, those desks that they still have 6, 8, 10, or 20 years of lease on, and they're now finding an outlet to begin to monetize or at the very least put to use that inventory that's otherwise lying fallow. In over 600 cities, we didn't exist 3 years ago. We're now in over 600 cities and on demand, pay per use. So what does that look like then for a company that leans into this behavior? Well, it means that rather than having to put fixed assets in all of the locations where my employees work, and rather than having to try to match all of the tastes and all of the tasks that my employees have, I now have, in essence, infinite real estate. If I want to do a sexy product launch in Miami, I can rent a boat. If I want to touch down in Dulles and work effectively in a private alcove inside of a Marriott hotel for free, I can book it on demand. If I want to do a power lunch in DC, if I want to do a sales team or a strategy session on site, this is effectively infinite real estate now. And then just to close, a couple of anecdotes on companies that are beginning to use this and what their mindset is behind it. Accenture is now aggressively pursuing a strategy of growth without growth. 450 office locations around the world. They've effectively held their portfolio flat for the last 10 years, while their headcount has more than doubled. Most recently in New York, they punted on the option of taking an adjacent floor in their Avenue of the Americas building because they found sufficient inventory in LiquidSpace, including spaces across the street, priced at parity with what their internal burden cost per headcount was for a fixed office. So they've shifted from 5, 7, 10-year lease commitments that just don't square with their dynamic demand needs to real estate that is the same price, but with infinite flexibility. Infinite in location, infinite in capacity. Autodesk, having just onboarded 500 salespeople into Liquid Space to become the platform that they leverage externally. Should I stop? I'm sorry. That was 5 minutes.
No. It was double the 4 minutes
All
that
right,
you were
sorry.
looking for. So we're going to switch over to the WeWork deck, and I'm afraid when I turn the clicker over to someone, what's going to happen?
I'm going to break this whole trend in standing up thing. I like it sitting down. So, again, another company founded in 2010, did not exist 5 years ago. And I'm going to skip the whole history lesson because I agree with everything that was just said 100%. I mean, it's exactly why we created WeWork. It's exactly why we're doing so well. It's exactly why we're so successful. So there's a huge shift in the way that people do business, the way that people work, the way they live, they communicate. Everything has changed in the last 5 years. So we essentially like to say that we pioneer space as a service. What does that mean? Today, WeWork has 20 locations. We're located in 7 cities in the US. We have 4 international cities that are now under construction. By the end of the year, we'll have 25 open and operating facilities. Average size square foot of one of our locations is roughly 50,000 square feet. We're planning on opening 30 new locations next year. Half of those are currently today under construction, and the other half are either in lease negotiation or in signed leases already. So by the end of 2015, we'll have roughly 3.5 million square feet globally, 15,000 members today, about 40,000 members by the end of the year, by the end of 15, sorry, and we're 96% occupied across all of our locations as of today. So essentially what we do is month-to-month flexible office space. Existing model, Regis has been doing it for 100 years, but we made it young, we made it fun, we made it exciting, and what we really did is we gave people a way to be more successful, better at what they do. The problem with entrepreneurs, small businesses, freelancers today is they're too busy bogged down with stuff, with the bullshit. Sorry, I hate to say it, but it's bullshit for them. Finding space, architecture, build out, office management, cleaning, accounting, legal services, all these things that detract from what they do best, which is whatever they're focused in, their industry. And what we've done is create a concept where you can kind of push all that aside. It's 100% turnkey. You can come into a WeWork facility anywhere in the world. You know it's a WeWork because we build all glass and steel. There's no sheetrock walls, no drywall. You can see a window. You can see the people working next to you from every location, from anywhere you're sitting. In the top right corner is really a prime example of what we do. You can stand up and you can see outside. And it's kind of the core function for what we do. Again, this is more of a history lesson, but I'll go quickly through it. Urbanization is a huge trend now. Everyone's moving back into the cities. You know, our parents, well, my parents grew up leaving the cities, going to suburban life. That's all changed. Everyone now wants to come back to the cities. We see it in pretty much every city across the country. Cities like we mentioned earlier, Denver, Minneapolis, Austin, Seattle, very young cities, so to speak. In the last 5 years, those cities have truly changed. Sharing economy was mentioned earlier, very much like what he does. Airbnb, Uber. I mean, really people today, the young generation, we call them the millennials. At WeWork, we call them the We generation because we don't really think it's about age. We see more as a shift in mindset. So people from all ages can be part of the We generation versus millennials, which is really geared towards a specific age demographic. And, entrepreneurship. So I have a slide. So this actually changed. I have the update. For 2013, an average of 414,000 small businesses opened a month in the United States. The number is down from 2012, primarily because these businesses are now more successful. Corporate America is downsizing. There's a shift in the way people want to work. There's a shift in the hours they want to work. There's a shift in the environments they want to be in. And so people are leaving corporate America to provide these one-off services on their own at a much cheaper rate, making significantly more money and enjoying their lifestyle. Just quickly, kind of what cities we're in today. We have 2 locations in Seattle. We just closed the deal in Portland, which will be our first. 4 in San Francisco, 2 open and operating, 2 more in construction. 1 open and operating in LA, 1 in Santa Monica that's signed under lease, a second in Santa Monica, hopefully closing the next couple weeks. Downtown LA, again, young, thriving market. We're about to open our first location. Have our first deal in Austin that will open up at the end of this year. First deal in Miami signed in South Beach. We have two open and operating businesses in DC. A third and a fourth will open this year and early next year. One in Philadelphia that's under construction now today. We have 11 open and operating in New York, roughly 1.2 million square feet. And we have 2 open and operating in Boston. And so these are, this is just an example of what WeWork looks like. We have these breakout rooms. It's really truly an environment for people to collaborate. Every nook, every cranny, everything is used in a particular way. We've brought all our designers and architects in-house, so we're 100% vertical on the construction and design. We have 30 full-time architects and designer in-house whose sole responsibility is to create this vibe in different cities and different buildings, and every single WeWork floor looks different. It's true to the neighborhood it's in, it's true to the building it's located within. So our Midtown New York location looks and feels different than our Soho location, looks and feels different than our DC location, and it really is a wide spectrum, but when you walk into a WeWork, you know you're in a WeWork. Kitchens on every floor, pantries, all curated and designed, with all this collaboration in mind. This is WeWork Labs. It's an open floor concept. It represents about 5% of our total portfolio of space. So I failed to mention this. WeWork is 100% month to month. Whether you're 150 employees with WeWork, and we have companies that large, or you're a single individual, everything is month to month. You can come in, you sign a 30-day, month-to-month lease, automatic renewal. We guarantee we won't raise your rents for the first 12 months you're there, and that's across the board. WeWork Labs, open floor concept, cheaper version for young startups, entrepreneurs who don't have the ability to afford a $700 or $750 a month private office. We operate this in New York, San Francisco, and DC today. So we have 3 locations for WeWork Labs. And again, 100% full curated. WeWork Labs is by acceptance. You actually have to apply to get into a WeWork Labs. It's the only way to get in. You have to apply. It's by application. And you have an interview. We read your business plan, and then we accept you. Because it's very important that we curate our community within WeWork Labs. Again, just some more pictures, and then, yeah. Thank God it's Monday. It's just, kind of the new age slogan of, hey, we all want to be at WeWork. Because the environment, the vibe, who the hell wants to go home today, and live on their couch or their friend's couch or, wherever they're living today, the young generation, for them, this is the nicest space that they occupy and that they're part of.
Okay,
Great.
thank you. Alexa?
Great. So I work for Forest City, and Forest City, just for those of you who don't know, is a large national developer. We do projects typically at a large scale, so we think a lot about placemaking and how placemaking can add asset value in the long term to our projects. And as a result of that, we took a project we had in San Francisco, which was a lengthy entitlement process. It's 4 acres. It's downtown, but abutting SoMa, so it's right at the edge of the SoMa area, which is a very explosive area for the tech community in San Francisco. And we took that 4 acres and the inevitable 5-year entitlement process and wanted to experiment a bit while we were rezoning the project to go from about 800,000 square feet to about 2 million square feet of program. So let's see. There we go. Excellent. So generally what we were observing was that real estate prices were higher in areas where we would call it a networked place or a networked community. So this is actual Twitter feeds. And the red dots are a greater intensity of Twitter feeds compared to the lighter dots. Now, everyone looks at the infrastructure. It's a little scary because everyone's obviously doing Twitter feeds on the Golden Gate Bridge. However, other than that, the other interesting part of this slide is that when you overlay values in San Francisco, where you generate the highest rent per square foot for residential, it matches this underlying infographic. And that is showing us what we see in the real estate world, which, of course, my colleagues here have highlighted, which is we're in a different world. It's shifting. The preferences are shifting. What does that look like? And I think we entered the 2000 era of the 2001 era, where things were all about, you don't need space, you have a computer, why do you have to go anywhere? And now we're in a generation where actually you really do need space, you just need a very different type of space. And you see the emergence of everything from the models we've just talked about to place-based models like food trucks, events, pop-up communities that really resonate with people and build asset value. And so we wanted to take that concept of how real estate as a physical asset can be a platform. The iPhone is the example, or the quintessential example, where we barely use it to, well, we often use it, but we use it for both speaking and connecting to one another, but we use it mostly for the apps that are on it. So it was really about how do you hold that software to create much more dynamic places, and how do you push real estate beyond the physical portions of its assets in order to get to the underlying value of it in today's economy. And there's a few different ways to do that. We all are very focused on design typically, but the other two of tenanting and how you overtly tenant in order to recruit a different environment for the larger asset at hand, and then how you operate that asset, I think, shifts in this world, and there's a really strong ability to do that. So what we did is we took the 4 acres. The Chronicle was the single tenant on the site at the time. They we're taking about 100,000 of a 250,000 square foot office space. The rest was parking lots. So we said, let's tenant these. Well, let's recruit tenants that we think are placemaking or network-based tenants. And so we had several categories: entrepreneurship, arts, making, where we went out and found those tenants. And we signed the leases and market leases, but we overtly went to Menlo Park to find Tech Shop and bring them into a city location in San Francisco and said, it's time for you to open a second location in the city. This is the place to do it. Here's why. And so we ended up going from a very isolated set of parking structures in the Chronicle that's a little bit of a fortress to being an epicenter for innovation on a smaller level within San Francisco. So the hub is the co-working environment we worked with. It's a slightly different model than others in the sense that they concentrate a lot on events, so they have an event or two a week. Now there's many more models like this, of course. Intersection for the Arts, that was a platform for artists. They have 400 artists in residence at any given time. They do chalkboards and various art installations around the site to bring community together in addition to performance arts. Tech Shop, which is like a gym membership for any tool you can imagine to make or prototype. So Square prototyped their device at Tech Shop and did it for, $20,000, whereas it would have cost them $200,000 if they had to go through a traditional manufacturing process to prototype that, which helped them launch their company. So we're seeing a huge hardware revolution, so that's why we tenanted them and so forth. We have food trucks and events and different pop-up things that occur on the site, and this is really through partnership. Forest City hasn't invested any money in this. What they've done is they have invested time in clearing the path for people to use the site in an interesting way, and that's produced a tremendous amount of asset value, which has turned into a greater success than I think we thought we would have, because we were probably just on a curve of what was naturally happening in the market anyway. And so it ended up becoming this place for people to go to innovate. It was sort of where you could socialize and network and find whether it's contractors or different ideas and people in different sectors that you wanted to connect with. And that was really what we were after as a value proposition, which turned into even Yahoo coming and knocking on our door and saying, we did not have space for lease, but we did have some dead space left. And they said, look, we've got to be here. So you have to figure out a way to get us in. And the reason that, we kind of did a slide around this of their interpretation of the site was that it wasn't just a real estate solution, it was a solution for them for our talent recruitment, for product development. The background slide is Square was one of our initial tenants. They prototyped their device at Off the Grid, would look at how it was working and go up, their engineers would go back up and retool, come back down and prototype their device again. So they were using the city as a lab. It was a very interesting way to use an urban campus, and of course branding. So how did we design the project in its next phase? Of course, we did what we all have to do, which is think about floor plates, how to get the bigger ones, how to have less turns, and a minimal amount of column lines and so forth. But then we also thought a lot about how do you do things like create a much more Soma-esque feel, lower rise towards the center of the site, push the density and the high-rise components to the edges, create a mixed-use environment so you have more of a neighborhood than an office park, have very compelling open spaces that can host the types of events that the users have more in a campus in Menlo Park, or that a neighborhood just wants to have and live around, et cetera. And that has sort of brought us to thinking of things like, where do even cores go? How do the future tenants lay out? How do you increase the amount of interactions and natural overlaps you have between the organizations? A lot of these learnings came from failed experiments, 5M today, of the hubs in one building, tech shops in another. You have to have very overt collaboration between those two organizations, but if they were located right next to each other, it has much more organic exchange, et cetera. Likewise, in operations, we joke around that not only do we have to manage for a network, but we have to get away from real estate operations where you're sort of regulating and it's the guy who's completely disconnected in the front door to how are you hosting. And this is actually an urban prototyping event that happened at 5M, which we did have insurance for all the real estate people out there. But it shows this sense of how can you create a lot more intrigue and surprise, and how do you develop events so that the place, even though all of these things happen at 5M, by the way, but even though you have a very solid set of tenants in real estate, you're creating a place that constantly changes and has movement and inspires and feels a little different, and that's the type of place people want to be around. So, obviously in the design, not only do we have beautiful architecture that looks a little different than the architecture you see in a traditional downtown context, so it's not signaling financial district, it's signaling towers that are of Soma, but then you also have very open space that can hold different events, that has on the rooftop greenhouses where you can have programming going on, et cetera. And so that's some of the learnings that we've had in 5M, and it's up for approvals this year, and we'll be off and running from there. Thanks.
That was an excellent setup, you guys. Thank you very much. So while we're just sort of staying in the big picture zone, maybe you can each just comment very briefly. We look back 5 years and we saw what has happened since. So let's just fast forward 5 years, and just give me your speed answer. Where do you think each of you will be with your respective areas?
So I think in 5 years, we'll look back on this next 5 years as this great era of unbuilding, where we'll learn how to harvest the existing built landscape and tap into all of that inventory that's otherwise lying underutilized. We'll solve this dilemma of the Class A space that's out of favor. Our business will be growing deeper and deeper into the classic brokerage business. We started with hourly and daily transactions. We've done over 1 million of those. We're just about to announce moving into longer-term transactions up to a month in length. And so that will allow us to begin to bring in new types of assets into the platform, but also serve more use cases.
So it's interesting. A lot's changed, obviously, in the last 5 years. They say, there's a report that says 40% of all Americans will be entrepreneurs, freelancers, or small business owners in 5 years from now. If that's the case, then I'm not sure how big WeWork is, but these people need a place to work. I also think corporate America shrinks significantly. I think that the big banks, I think a lot of the big industries give back a lot of space. And I think that a lot of the large real estate landlords in the world, especially in the US, but across the whole world, need a solution for that. They need a way to break that space up in a way that's not, creating these tiny little nooks that are just sheetrock walls. They need someone who's going to come and actually, do it for them and design it properly and create these collaborative environments where these small business entrepreneurs and freelancers, and really all companies, 100, 200 person employees. We have companies that we work that are larger than that. And they take space from us because they like the flexibility, they love the environment, they want to empower their employees to be entrepreneurial even within a corporate setting. And that's important for a lot of the companies that take space with us. So 5 years from now, I think there's a WeWork in every city. I think that we're probably several million, tens of millions of square feet. And I think that our model has changed slightly in the sense that we're doing longer-term deals. I think we're doing much larger-term deals, and I think we're curating whole buildings rather than floors. And we're acting as almost like an operator management company.
And Alexa, to be more general than just your specific project in terms of building communities where people want to come and work and do a whole lot of other things at the same time, where do you see that evolution over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think in real estate, what we're seeing, at least in San Francisco, because obviously it's the market I'm the most familiar with, is that big users are moving into the city, but they haven't figured out how to use the city. So they're still building their internalized cafeterias. It's creating not great streets around them. So their employees are going, well, I'm in the city, and that's convenient locationally, but they're not harnessing that value and thinking through how they should have WeWork as 50,000 or 100,000 square feet, and how they, of the space that's in their building, and how they should marry up with the organizations in that, and how they should, use the retail on the ground floor and do a point system instead of build an internalized cafeteria. I think that all of that's also going to move over to our living environment in ways that we haven't quite seen yet. So, I mean, I think the shift has happened because the talent has wanted to be in cities, and we're seeing a huge preference towards cities generally. But how to use the city is still yet to be determined.
So there's only so many sort of older warehousey, lofty buildings around. And obviously those are, with the big floor plates and whatnot, are in high demand. What product do you guys see being demanded? What kind of product do you see being built? And what kind of product do you see becoming functionally obsolete? You want to start, Alexa?
Sure. I mean, I think I would have had a different answer for this a few years ago, because there was definitely in San Francisco an obsession with the brick buildings, warehouse style, and then we ran out of that space. And the question was the preference for the physical aspects of that space or the city, what was higher? And then we saw Salesforce take 600,000 square feet in a very iconic tower in Transbay. And we're seeing more and more of that type of thing. And I think there's a couple different layers of it. Mission Bay is also an area that does not have a lot of placemaking to it, which, notoriously Evan, the guy who runs Twitter, went over to it and basically said, no, I said to his broker, I actually wanted to be in the city because it doesn't feel like it. But you're still seeing those spaces being leased. It's just after everything else has leased up. So I think there's two tiers of things. I do think new construction can respond to the next generation demands. I don't think it's obsolete, but I do think that places that are more neighborhood and feel, and however you get to that, are going to perform better.
So I would have agreed a year ago that the brick and beam buildings, the industrial space is cool, and that's where my member wants to be. I actually don't think that's the case. I think my member cares most about accessibility. Where we're headquartered now in New York City, across from the new Trade Center, is probably the ugliest building I've ever seen. It's really one of the ugliest buildings I've ever seen, and Mitchell's been there several times. But when you walk into our space...
It's not that ugly. We're not the landlord, but it's not that ugly.
It's pink.
It's plain.
It's like pink. But when you walk into our space, you almost forget where you are. And that's the beauty of what we're trying to create. So I think what I would say is the core locations where you have access to transportation, where you have access to shopping, where you have access to food is actually much more important than going to work and saying, oh, I work in this cool building. And while that's nice, it's a novelty, and that wears off very quickly. And what we have found, and we've done this, we've taken those cool buildings that are a little off the beaten path, and we have found that members will actually move from that to our more centralized location, whether it's in the CBD or right outside or right on top of a transportation hub. We have this in Boston. We were in the Seaport. We have this beautiful brick and beam building in the Seaport, and we find that actually they're moving from that because they don't want to walk. So they're moving right across the street from South Station, where we have another location, which is much more corporate and it's not cool and not exciting at all. But they want to be there because it's easy and it's accessible. And I think that's really the most important thing for a lot of these young people today. As far as new construction, I don't know. I mean, I think glass and steel works still. I don't necessarily have a problem with glass and steel. I know people, young entrepreneurs, tend to say, oh, it's glass and steel, it's a modern, it's a corporate office building. I think it's more important about what you do inside, and I think the buildings have to be very, very, very efficient, and they have to be environmentally friendly. Because people really want efficiency today. They don't want 250 or 300 square foot per person. They want, we work as an average, we are 60 square feet per person across our space. So I don't know that they're getting that far, but they want somewhere in the 100 to 150 range today, and anything less efficient than that just doesn't work.
Mark, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the exciting things about marketplaces, whether it's Airbnb or Uber or Liquid Spaces, we don't have to guess anymore. These marketplaces are big data engines. Uber has this uncanny ability to put the cars where they expect you to be, which is why they're usually there within 2 to 3 minutes. So we have the ability to look in and see what people are actually booking, where they are actually working. And today our purview is hour to day and duration. So I can tell you a whole lot about what the meeting space and day office requirements are in most cities across the US. I can tell you what you should build. I can tell you what your build out space programs and your palette of offerings should look like.
Well, that was my question, so do tell.
4 to 8 person meetings for on average 2 hours, booked on average 1.2 days in advance and for $137 an hour. That's today, right? And so as we step out into multi-day meetings and project spaces bookable for months on end, whether it's a startup space for a company or a swing space for Deloitte, we're going to be able to have that same level of visibility into what types of spaces people are actually transacting and rating and reviewing and the like. And so the guesswork of development or redevelopment should become less guesswork. It should become more data-driven.
So maybe specifically for you, I'll call you Mark WeWork as opposed to Mark Liquid Space. So when you've seen a lot of buildings and you've gone into a lot of buildings, you talk about the density. So it's heartening to hear for those of us who have a large built inventory that you can, that you can go into different projects and your customers are going to be happy. What about elevators, bathrooms, infrastructure in terms of because of the density that you're trying to achieve, air conditioning and whatnot? How do you find that?
So it's an issue everywhere. That's the easy answer. There are deals we walked away from because we can't get legal egress. It's just the nature of things. I think when you start thinking about new development, you've got to think about densities in that range. And you have to think about additional staircases. I think that's important. HVAC is a big issue, not so much in San Francisco, but in, the more temperate, like Miami, for instance. We're opening in Miami. We've had a big issue with HVAC. We're basically ripping out the system. It's part of the infrastructure that we are investing into these buildings, and we do it. Now, on the other side of it, we sign really long-term deals because of that, because of our capital investment to all of our projects. For us, a 5, 7, 10-year deal probably doesn't work. We like 15 to 20-year deals. Elevators, I think the young generation, if you do something cool with an elevator, if you put a little communal space next to the elevator, if you put TVs, but curated properly, not just TVs with the news showing someone on CNN with the volumes muted, but actually put it, actually do something where they can focus on it for 30 to 60 seconds and enjoy it, then they don't care about the wait. And they're okay waiting if the rest of the environment feels good and if they're happy to go to work. They don't care. People who don't like waiting for an elevator are usually the ones that don't like going to work. If you like going to work and you enjoy where you are and you enjoy being there, then that wait and all these little problems aren't problems. The people that complain are the ones that really aren't happy about being there, not the ones that are.
If I can add, I work in a WeWork building in San Francisco, and they actually advertise the calories that I burn by taking the staircase. So part of their culture is also selling, a healthy approach to life in general. So I haven't touched the elevator once.
Any thoughts, Alexa, on this?
On which particular, sorry.
Just in terms of the building, the
Oh.
buildings and, can
Yeah.
they meet the demands of the high intensity use?
Sure. Yeah, I think when we think about the floor plates and the side cores and all those different components, we absolutely have a lot of the way it works in mind. And I think there's also the operating piece that has been touched on a little in terms of the experience waiting for the elevator, or do you allow bikes into the hallways and into the space, and what is the experience with the front door person, and how is that related to the tenant's brand, and all of those types of things that I think will also evolve along with the workplace involvement.
So let's talk about how flexibility for some of your customers relate to basically, to brick and mortar real estate. So, landlords are used to signing 5, 10, 15-year leases. And, obviously people are looking for more flexibility, rent, by the hour, by the month. Where does that leave traditional landlords, if you will, other than for us to lease everything to the Wies, in terms of where do you see that going in terms of length of lease terms, et cetera, et cetera? How does that work for each of your businesses?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously strongly believe that we should lease to WeWorks. We don't want to get into that business. It's not what we do. It's not how we do it. And so I think the placemaking uses that we talked about on the ground, the one difference that I talk to my company a lot about is just that the ground will be less expensive and you'll generate more rents in the vertical portion, which for large scale projects is really not that big of a deal because it's only 5%, 10% of the overall space, if that, given that you have so much space that's lobby and circulation and so forth. So you're really sort of reducing your rents on that to gain a lot more rents in the vertical piece. But I don't think we'll ever be a structure where we want to become we're not that fast in terms of our understanding of how things change, and frankly, things change very fast. And so you have to be a very particular structure in order to understand how to fluidly move with it. And real estate by nature is it's a capital intensive, conservative industry for good reason. And so I don't think that's a match.
So I agree. I mean, look, the truth is, well, I need a lot of space, but forget about that for a second. The corporate America is not going anywhere. There's still these companies that want the security, a lot of the law firms, a lot of banks, they want the security of a 10 or 15-year deal. They want to know that this is where they're going to be. They know what their rents are. They can run it out over a model. They can underwrite it a certain way. They need that. And that model's not going anywhere. Not going anywhere, not by a long shot. I do think in new construction, new development, you're always going to have these buildings that are inefficient, old world buildings that you need to figure out solutions for, and we can help with that. And there are a lot of companies that can provide cool alternatives for those buildings. But I think that corporate America is not going anywhere. I will say what's interesting is when WeWork was founded 4 years ago, we were founded primarily offering services to small business entrepreneurs and freelancers, and that's not the case anymore. We actually feel like we compete with office in general. We have companies, again, like American Express, who was a member of WeWork for 3 years, literally took an entire department because it was a young, creative department, and they moved it to WeWork to empower these employees. Within Forest City, actually, I don't know if you know this, in New York, had offices with us. Mm-hmm. And they do that because they want their young employees to be out of this, 8-foot drop ceiling, depressing cubicle, and they want to move them to somewhere. And actually, Vornado's offices are very nice, but they want to move them somewhere where they can feel inspired to do more. And in an entrepreneurial setting, even if they're not entrepreneurial by nature, they will be inspired to work the same hours that somebody who has to figure out how they're paying their rent, or figure out how they're eating, or figure out how they're going out to party. All those things go in, and it's inspiring for all employees. So we have a lot of large companies today that are taking big blocks of space. We're curating a floor for them, and they're taking 10, 15, 20,000 square feet from us simultaneously, and bringing their employees there, and they're working within a WeWork atmosphere. We're still providing all the services, we're doing it, but just on a different scale.
I think on the demand side, the appetite for flexibility is going to only increase dramatically, right? For two reasons. One, I think work is just going to continue to become more mobile. We don't have to go to the desk anymore to get work done. We've got mobile computing. And secondly, large occupiers, I believe, I'm seeing it now, are expecting more and more resiliency in their operations, right? So whether it's being able to be resilient to Hurricane Sandy or resilient to the next inevitable economic cycle, they want to know that much of their portfolio can ebb and flow. On the supply side, I think the big opportunity for portfolio owners is to take a more customer-centric approach to how they bring to market their portfolio. We're coming from a model where you were long on all of it. Long-term leases of an entire floor plate was what you sought for 10 years or longer if you could. And what we're now seeing is the progressive portfolios are introducing a palette of different options that they then offer to their occupiers. They'll bring in a WeWork or a ServCorp or a co-working space to provide short transactional access. And that, along with their larger leased footprint pieces, become a total solution for large companies like American Express. And so you're even seeing some REITs are even beginning to experiment with launching their own brands of co-working spaces or their own brands of shared space. So I think net, you're going to see a balanced sort of portfolio where I can go short, medium, or long as an asset owner.
Yeah, just circling back to the question really quickly, I mean, Yahoo as the anchor tenant, or I don't think the big campus for the big users go away, and I think maybe they come into the city. I also think, I will say they are learning a lot from the WeWork and those types of models where they're effectively changing their space. So we saw that in your space with Motorola yesterday, where they have event space, they have venue space in order to drive those social opportunities. I do think there are some components that we could do by pulling things like whether it's a larger theater space out of the tenant space and having it as a shared resource for the building, because so many of the tenants have the same needs, and we probably should be thinking about some of those aspects as well. And then likewise in our living environments, we are doing that much more, which I'm sure many of you are doing, of having a bigger kitchen where it's a chef's kitchen where you can host parties in the space, and that allows everyone to live with their 450 square foot apartment in San Francisco and pay much more on a per square foot basis in rent, because they have some shared resources that allow them the flexibility of hosting a party and doing other social events. So I do think there's a host of things like that that we should keep our eye on as an industry. But it doesn't change, it's just an evolution of the fundamentals versus some radical shift.
So you guys sort of generally just answered my next question. If you now talk about sort of what's been done with the creatives, what's been done with the mobiles, and people who are on the edge, how does that sort of then flow back into corporate America, and what kind of changes, what do you see happening now? Yahoo's obviously an example of a company that would be on the progressive end, but if you go to financial services, if you go to law firms, where do you see some of these things changing how people work in more traditional offices?
Well, the workplace strategists, the consultants, whether they're at Accenture or Herman Miller or JLL, they're all out spending a lot of time looking at what this guy's doing and others like him, right? And so the big corporate campuses are already tracking with the types of progressive environments that are being experimented with out in the fringe. And so I think it's blurring. The wall of the corporate campus is now permeable. You don't just commute there. The workplace is all of the places that employees work. And so the asset owners, or rather the occupiers, the enterprise clients that you guys are all courting, they're looking at what their employees are doing on the go, and more they're making their internal workplace look like those environments.
Yeah, so one thing I will say, and I think it's important to think about, is that Google creating Google Space, where they've got these breakout rooms on their floor. If anyone's ever seen a Google floor, and you walk their space, you can't really have collaboration from two people from the same company doing the same job just because they got up from their cubicle and they went to another space that looks nicer. That's not really collaboration. When you all work for the same company and you all have the same goals and you're all like-minded already in the pursuit of those goals, it's very hard to create collaboration. Collaboration comes, at least from our experience, when two people who are completely at opposite ends of the spectrum and kind of, everything in the middle, but, really are tackling a project or a problem or something from completely different thought patterns. And it's very important that, at least if I was advising a corporate America client, I would say, look, it's very important that you realize that just taking space and making it nice and cool is not going to create or foster this collaboration. It's not just going to, where all your employees are all of a sudden going to be happy and they're going to hang out. We have kegs on every one of our floors that we work. It's kind of our trademark. And, come 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, there are people out there who have never met before. They're all having a beer and they're enjoying each other. You won't get that in corporate America just because you put a keg on the floor. You'll get it if the building and the atmosphere and everything else created is curated in the right way. So it's not so much the design, even the design plays to it, it's the curation of all the common space. Every giant apartment building I can think of has these amenity floors that I've never seen a person on. I have it in New York City. In my building, we've got a wine bar and a pool room, and nobody's ever used them. And it's because they're not curated properly. So the design is important, but without the curation, without somebody really coming in and thinking about how everything interacts with each other, it doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, so that's the exact software hardware analogy that I was trying to express. It's interesting, at the project that I talked about with that shared kitchen, we had a chef come in for a period of time and do lessons, we did parties, and then everyone started using it, and it was booked out all the time. So in some ways, it's learning how to use space, and then actually the community does it on its own. So, you know, it's funny because I think we can get nervous in the real estate industry of saying, well, I don't want to be stuck running events all the time. And actually, I don't think that's what has to happen. We partnered with Intersection for the Arts, and they basically created an art gallery out of the circulation space in one of the tenants' space. So there's constant art rotating in that space in different events and so forth. So I totally agree with that. I think there's also a whole open space platform that can happen off of that. And again, it's just about realizing that it's only the first, call it 6 months, that you're investing in that in terms of really heavily from the real estate side, building the program, and then it starts to happen organically and on its own.
So from a first impression standpoint, when will you guys interact with people with neckties and say, I think they're just not going to get it, they're not creative, they're not flexible? When will the necktie become a negative as opposed to a neutral or a positive? You start, Alexa.
Well, there's a lot of neckties in Forest City, so I don't, I interact with neckties a lot. I don't know that, it's interesting. I've also been on an elevator and had somebody from our C-suite look at me and say, so I feel like the next time I come here, people are going to be in their pajamas and just, you know, pacifiers, for crying out loud. Like, why aren't they dressing up at all? And I think there is a middle ground. Like, you know, I think at the end of the day, what's happening is it's permeating to different cultures. And when we did the tour of Motorola, I found it very interesting that their average age was in the late 40s of their employees. I think we do find it's much younger in San Francisco. I don't think that means that there's not a spectrum of companies that are the very young entrepreneurial ones up to the ones that are more formal, and that's obviously okay. And it's just about the shift that happens along the way. So, you know, there's always going to be that continuum, but notoriously San Francisco is a very casual place, and I'm in jeans most days, and it is a little, you know, if you dress a certain way, you can be thought of as out of touch. And so the question is that a temporary thing until everyone moves towards that direction, or what's that all about?
Well, that was kind of a PC answer.
I know. I don't really know is really the answer.
Okay.
So the last time I wore a necktie was the first time I walked into WeWork. That was the last time I wore a necktie. Yeah, he told me if I wore it again, I wasn't allowed back. But I actually don't think the necktie goes away. I think it comes back. And I think that right now it represents something that the young generation, the millennials, try to steer clear of, which is corporate America. They see what happened in the 5-year period from 2007 till 2012, and they say, oh, that's all corporate America's fault. And I associate all corporate America with neckties. And that's, I think, the reason why they don't wear neckties is because they're trying to get away from that. And I think as time goes on and that memory starts to fade a little bit, I think the necktie comes back, maybe, a little bit.
It doesn't have any real function, as you're aware.
It doesn't. I think that, you know, it's interesting because if you walk into a meeting in WeWork wearing a necktie, people look at you funny. Like, who's the banker? Or, you know, this person's not cool. This person's not fun. I don't want to talk to that person. I don't want to work with that person. I don't want to be around that person. I think that's a phase. I think that'll go away. And I actually see now, you know, variations of neckties and younger people dressing more hip, and they're starting to wear suits again. I see it all the time at WeWork. So I think it'll come back. For right now, there's a little resentment.
Well, if it comes back, it'll be good. I've got 300 of them in my closet that I haven't worn in 12 years. I think, maybe to walk at the question a slightly different way, I think, look, I mean, predominantly neckties here, right?
Yeah.
And I've got 300 at home. I think the key underlying point is choice. And I think there's a healthy, large market that's going to be favoring formal work environments that might look a lot like the offices you guys work in. But by the same token, many of you probably have days when the environment or the task at hand for you is going to dictate something more casual. And how exciting that we're now in a market, in a stage of our development, as a society where there's technologies that can let choice be something you can make on a daily basis. Maybe I'm having a necktie day, or maybe I'm having a jeans day. Those choices are out there. From an asset owner standpoint, you can allow your space to be found by the person who wants the necktie environment, if that's what you've got, or to be found by the person who's looking for a WeWork experience.
So one last thing, I will say, I think the day that companies stop requiring their employees to wear neckties, or the day that they start becoming cool again.
The day
They start becoming cool again. Because it's a way to express yourself, and the people, the young generation is looking for that. And
No,
neckties,
I think, for ourselves, and we're starting to see in terms of just recruitment, and possibly even retention, people looking to be more comfortable, if that's the case. Who's got a burning question? I've got some other things I can talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
When does the WeWork Chicago open, and how many locations do you guys think you'll need here?
So we actually hired a very sophisticated firm to really go through every market in the entire country. They analyze 600 markets in the country, and they basically counted the number of businesses that are less than 100 employees. And then between 1 and 5, 5 and 10, 10 and 15, all the way up. I think Chicago, I love Chicago. I think outside New York, Chicago is probably my favorite city. Chicago feels good. I think that there's a big young push now coming back into Chicago. I think that a lot of real estate people who've been around Chicago for a long time are like, oh, it's just Chicago, things just stay flat. I don't see that anymore. We actually own our building in the West Loop. We're partners in that deal. That deal will open up in the first quarter of 15. It got delayed because of some issues, but first quarter 15. We have a deal in River North that we're pretty close to signing that'll hopefully open around the same time. I think Chicago for us is easily a 500,000 square foot city, and those two deals are about 90,000 square feet, so we're literally just tip of the iceberg.
Warren?
Do you think you're stealing demand from traditional offices or from traditional telecommuting? We invented telecommuting 20 years ago, and are people coming from home, or are they coming from the office?
I think both. I think when we started, we were more of the guys working out of his garage, out of his basement, out of, wherever, maybe a co-working space, maybe he was using something on a daily basis or a weekly basis. He was looking for something, a little bit nicer, a little bit more modern, more technology savvy, more, more collaborative. I think today, until the real estate world kind of catches up with these flexible type of leases and deals, they're looking to us, big companies are looking to us because they don't have another alternative. If you're a company and you're starting a new division, or you have 5 employees and you think you're going to be 100, what are you signing? Where are you going? You can't take a 15-year deal or a 10-year deal because you're just literally, you're killing yourself. So they're coming to us out of necessity, out of need. I think that changed. I think the real estate will catch up to that, and that'll shift, and it'll shift back. But I think that landlords kind of have to be more flexible, and they have to change the model that's been around for the last 100 years.
I would add, I think there is a rebound from teleworking. I think a lot of large enterprises implemented teleworking programs as a thinly veiled cost reduction plan. Take away the desk. Congratulations, you can work from home now. Problem is, sometimes home sucks as a place to work, right? And so, those employees would hack their way into Starbucks or elsewhere to find a place to get away from the barking dog or the distraction of the kitchen, or so forth. So I think, this growing ecology of spaces like WeWork that can provide shorter term or even hourly access to environments when needed is pulling people back out of the house.
There's two people here that are closer to me. Yeah? Yes.
Two questions on WeWorks. One is statistically, what's the average occupancy term working out to
So
for your
because,
clients? And then secondly,
yeah, sorry.
what's your default experience? Because most of them are startups.
I'll answer the second one first because it's easier. We're month to month, so we almost have no default. We have license agreements. They're not tenants, they're members. We have essentially no default rate. We ask for a month and a half security up front, and you can leave anytime with 30 days notice. It's actually cheaper for you to do the right thing and just tell us you're leaving. So the default rate is way below 1%.
Term?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about,
What to share?
we're young, we're 4 years old. We've grown a lot over the last 18 months. Our average term, so I'll speak more about churn rather than actual length of stay because that's easier for us to quantify. We roll about 20% a year. So 20% of our members will leave at their office. Now, where are they going, what they're doing, we're working on trying to figure out to solve those problems. A lot of it is because we don't have space for them to grow today. In New York, we're 96% occupied across our portfolio today. So if you're a 4-person company and you just merged or you need an 8-person office now, I probably don't have it. So we're looking at ways to solve those problems. Obviously, that's part of why we're expanding so rapidly is because the demand is there and we're trying to solve that. But on people that actually leave WeWork because they want to or because they just don't want to be part of WeWork is somewhere in the 8 to 10% range based on the exit surveys that we've been doing.
I'm sorry, a general question for any of the analysts, which is, there's a certain coolness associated with not owning a bicycle, not owning a car, not owning a house, not having a permanent office space. And so this notion of flexibility or transience or however you want to label it seems to be a theme at the moment. So if you take the set of millennials as enjoying this trend line, call it a paradigm shift, and fast forward 20 years, does that group still enjoy this form of lifestyle that they're enjoying today?
That's a great question. Do you have an answer yourself? You have a theory?
I'm in search, so
Okay.
more than I do, and so I've come to the authority with the question.
Anyone? Give a shot.
You look at,
Yes,
take car ownership as an example of that. There's some very fascinating survey trends that are or data that's coming out now around the preferences around car ownership. And for 18 to 25-year-olds, owning a car is plummeting as a preference. The age that young eligible drivers are getting their driver's licenses is moving out. And so it looks like something more like an enduring trend than simply a fad. And of course, those individuals that are being liberated from buying a car, they're doing something else with that capital. They're going out and having fun, right? So I tend to think that these shifts toward more efficient uses of capital and better personal experience, where I stay, how I get there, what I do with my time, I think that those efficiencies are going to last.
Still living with their mother and dad.
They might still be living with their mommy and daddy. That's true. They might be. But they might be partying really hard with all the extra money they got because mommy and daddy are paying for the bedroom. That could be too. So,
The boomerangers.
But I mean, the thesis is that there's children in the equation.
Right.
There's a significant other in the equation. There's perhaps some interest in having a school system that can work through for some level of duration as opposed to being ultimately flexible and transient. So my thesis is a little bit that the enthusiasm toward this level of flexibility and transience will fade as the millennial moves through their lifespan.
I think it's a misread for us to assume that this whole sharing economy trend means everyone's going to become a nomad and all that they own is what's carried on their back. I think that's a misread.
Yeah.
I think
It's like
plenty
the
of
bike fixation
Yeah.
is, actually, they invest a lot in just in different things. But I think as we see the millennials getting older, as people start to have kids and need certain resources to physically be there, it's not that they won't use the sharing economy by principles, but it also doesn't mean they won't have space. So for example, they probably will want a living space that actually, for them, it would be cool if other people had kids as well. And we've done a bunch of surveys around this. And then there was shared childcare or a shared rooftop where there's an incredible space, or the beer garden with the playground next to it. So it's just about, I think, these resources of sharing that is a preference change. And I think as people get older, they'll take aspects of that, but they're not going to take, they're still going to invest in a house and invest in physical space. It's just they also want to invest in the other aspects of their lifestyle that they'll bring from the past, and that might be going to an Airbnb unit and renting a house in a cool neighborhood versus staying at a
Yeah,
hotel.
So, look, shared office space has been around forever. All right, we're not revolutionizing anything as far as a new concept. We're turning it on its side and making it, kind of what Schrager did to a boutique hotel. We're making it speak to a different generation, and we're doing it better, and we're implementing all this technology that's out there today that can actually make people's lives easier. So what we're doing is not revolutionary by any means. I don't think any of us are doing anything here that's revolutionary. We're taking technology that exists today and we're incorporating it into people's lives to make their life easier. I think that the extreme example you're talking to, where everyone gives up everything, I don't think that exists. I think that whenever there's a paradigm shift, there is one extreme to the other and then kind of back to the middle. So I don't think it's going to go away. I think it'll move more back to the middle. But if urbanization is really happening, and everyone talks about everybody moving back to the cities, if that's really happening, then just the nature of living in the city, you're giving up a lot of the things that you mentioned. You're already giving that up. You've already decided that you don't want that lifestyle. If you're moving to the city, you've already said that, hey, I want this easier, more convenient, more flexible lifestyle. And I don't see them then moving back out to the suburbs. I don't think that's going to happen.
One last question? Anyone? Go ahead. Oh, wait, there's two people, so we'll make them both quick. First.
Mark, WeWork. Trendy is very now and very flippant. So do you intend to have very, very intense FF&E investment? And redo all of your spaces every 5 years? Because now West Elm and CB2 looks cool, but in another 5 years.
So, have you ever seen a WeWork?
Yes.
Okay. It's hard to understand WeWork unless you've walked in and you feel the energy and you actually have been in a space. Otherwise, it's kind of, this theoretical thing that you kind of have to see. So, the answer is, if you've been in a WeWork, what we build is actually very minimal. Glass and steelwork, open glass is simple. We use wood flooring, which we think gets cooler and more exciting as it gets more worn. Every material we pick is for the purpose of, because we're thinking about, we signed 10, 20-year deals, we're thinking about how they're going to age. And that's one of the most important things the largest challenge that our design team is faced with every day is what are we picking, what materials are we using, which is why we're very bare in that sense. We don't clutter the space. We do it purposely because we feel like what we're creating is really for an entire term of a deal. We will have some FF&E stuff. We're going to have to change couches. We're going to have to change chairs. We're going to have to change, kind of the little things that we do that make the space special. But, that you're talking about probably 5 or 6% of the total budget of our spaces.
Last question.
Last question for both Liquid Space and WeWork. How do you guys, and I think you alluded to it earlier when you're talking about running a high occupancy, how do you, from a business model perspective, how do you maintain on-demand availability for people to expand or contract in the use of your services or the actual physical square footage and still run 98% occupancy?
Well, for us, our platform actually operates like OpenTable. We are the system of record. We're the GDS. So we keep track of the availability of all the inventory on our platform by the minute. So it shows up as available when it's available, and when someone books it, it's no longer available, just like Expedia or something else. And so our brand pledge is what you see in Liquid Space is real-time inventory that you can have in the moment.
So for us, I think it's our biggest challenge today. We have a wait list in most of our cities, San Francisco and New York. We have wait lists for companies that want to be in a WeWork. And what we do is we give preference to our current members. So we will know what space is coming up 30 days earlier. And we have community managers that operate and manage each floor. They create the collaboration. Their job is really just to create connections. You're going to go to them if you want to expand. You're going to tell them, and they're really, 30 days out, you can really get first shot at something coming available. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. And so our biggest churn or turn in our membership are companies that we can't facilitate that growth for. What's the solution? I don't know. We don't have one.
You do it through pricing, like an airplane model, where you maintain availability but increase the price?
Never. We've increased our price one time in 4 years.
I think that opportunity is coming, though, revenue management. So the same principles that are applied to hotels and airlines and other asset classes can and will be applied to dynamic pricing of real estate.
So for hourly, for kind of little things, absolutely. For us, we say it's not a we thing to do. If we're really preaching this community and collaboration, it wouldn't be very we of us just to raise prices because we can.
Right.
So.
On that note, Alexa, Mark, and Mark, thank you very much. Very informative.